We made USAA insurance for veterans like James. When he found out how much USAA was helping members save, he said,
"It's time to switch."
We'll help you find the right coverage at the right price. USAA. What you're made of, we're made for. Restrictions apply.
Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review episode for April 29th, 2023. I am Brendan Cassidy.
And I'm Captain Hook himself, Ryan McQuaid.
You always did have a hook for a hand. That was your weapon of choice, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then I got one of those Luke Skywalker prosthetics. It was actually really great.
Yeah, how's that working for you? Is that going
I got
well?
upgraded, baby.
Does it feel weird? Does it actually feel like flesh? Like, I always wondered about that.
Like, you know when they do that in the end of Empire, right? Where they do the finger test. I was like, I don't need no finger test. I'm just going to walk around. This thing kind of has a mind of its own. You know, it slaps people randomly, you know, at restaurants, gas stations, the Oscars, stuff like that.
So you're telling me you have artificial intelligence for your hand? Okay,
listen,
that tracks.
it's very dangerous. But it can write a hell of an essay, you know. So.
Who would have thought the perfect way to introduce an episode on Peter Pan and Wendy would be talking about artificial hands? I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense. You know, Hook does have his own version of an artificial hand. But anyway, that is to say we are talking about the latest in the string of Disney live-action remakes. Or I guess in this case, we should say less of that and maybe more of the next film from writer and director David Lowery.
Yeah, that's better.
I feel like this is a film that maybe straddles that line almost equally. We'll certainly talk about that as we dive into Peter Pan and Wendy, or as I was going to introduce this episode as, Ryan, we're off to Never Land.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Metallica has a new album out. I feel like I need to reference it in some way.
Sleep with one eye open, gripping your pillow tight.
I love that song. I love that song so much. But yes, this is the next film from writer and director David Lowery, who is slowly becoming one of the, I guess, most premier examples of one for you, one for me kind of filmmaking. We've seen that a lot in many filmmakers over the years, but David Lowery has kind of been the biggest proponent of that with his now 2 Disney live-action remakes. If we really want to consider Pete's Dragon a live-action remake, it's kind of just another version of that movie through the lens of David Lowery. But of course, he has also worked with A24 many times with movies like A Ghost Story and The Green Knight. Now he's back working with Disney in a film that only got distributed on Disney Plus, did not even get put in theaters. It's kind of unfortunate, Ryan. Kind of unfortunate. There are things about this movie. I think we both have thoughts. I'll just say that there are things about this movie that I would have loved to at least see on the big screen. And we'll certainly talk about that. But I'm looking forward to this one, Ryan. I don't know if I've stated this to you, but it's at least been publicized on past episodes when JD and I would do some of our most anticipated of the upcoming years. Mm-hmm. And Peter Pan and Wendy, I think, was supposed to come out. It was maybe 2022, I think, was the first slate for it, and then it was delayed due to other reasons that I'm actually not sure about. But at one point, I did include it in my top 5 most anticipated films of whatever year we were talking about there. And it's because I am a huge fan of David Lowery, and I know that you are as well. So we were both very excited for this film, Peter Pan and Wendy. Of course, David Lowery, once again behind the camera, with his co-writer Toby Holbrook, also worked with him on Pete's Dragon. The film stars Ever Anderson, who is apparently the daughter of Mila Jovovich and Paul W.S. Anderson. This is her first leading role, which is exciting to see. The film also features Alexander Maloney, Jude Law, I'm going to butcher this last name, but I'm going to try my best. Alyssa Wapanatok. She plays Tiger Lily in this movie. We also have Jim Gaffigan, Joshua Pickering, Jacoby Jupe, A few others come in here as well. Molly Parker and Alan Tudyk are in only 2 scenes, only very briefly as Mr. and Mrs. Darling, respectively. And, of course, this is the story of Peter Pan. Well, specifically Peter Pan and Wendy. You've heard this story before. It's nothing really new, although there are some things that David Lowery does in the back half that kind of scratch the surface of being new. We'll talk about that for sure. So with that said, Ryan, let's get into this conversation on Peter Pan and Wendy. The reviews have been somewhat positive. I think the response has been mostly in the positive realm, and I know you've been looking forward to this one. So what are your thoughts on David Lowery and his relationship with Disney thus far, and what did you think about Peter Pan and Wendy?
David Lowery, Brendan, is one of the best directors we have working today, period, full stop, end of sentence.
I agree.
No, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The man,
he's my guy. He's my guy. Yeah,
he's one of my guys too.
Yeah.
I think we can share him. We can be co-parents here.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. I love it.
It's fine.
I love hearing him in interviews too. He seems so sincere. It just seems like a great guy to talk to.
Seems very chill. Minus a IndieWire article that he was asked to do, sounding like a gunpoint. Then he sounds like a really chill guy. I've followed him since his first movie. I saw, Saint Nick, when it was like on VOD.
Oh yeah, that's one I have not seen. I have not seen Saint Nick yet.
It's good. It's one of you know what it is. It's one of those movies, and it's fine. But I can't wait to see what they do next.
Oh, okay. The InSession film trademark of a new filmmaker.
There you go. And then Ain't Them Body Saints came out, and I was really impressed by that film when it came out. I think it's still one of his lesser films, but
I agree.
But then Pete's Dragon, the best Disney live action film, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it.
What are you, more of a Beauty and the Beast guy?
No, I was gonna say I think Pete's Dragon is the only full-on great one of the Disney live-action remake.
That's fair.
I like Cinderella. I did like Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella. I thought that one was quite good.
I more or less like The Jungle Book. I don't think that's a bad movie.
I think it's okay. I think it's
fun, and it was kind of surprising for itself. Sure. I think that mostly everything else has been subpar to fine to what the hell am I doing here? And that's definitely the case. What the hell am I doing here? Definitely the case for The Lion King in 2019. Because that movie... You're
going to say that about Pinocchio as well.
Yeah, I forgot about that
one. A movie that features a literal pile of crap at one point.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking about Tom Hanks in that movie. But anyway, that's besides the point. I think that then, of course, obviously, he goes on like a great run. He's been on a 3-movie run that I just absolutely love. Ghost Story, fantastic. One of the best movies of that year. Was that your number 1 movie that year?
It was in my top 5 at the very least.
I know that you were very high on it.
It was definitely my top 5. I'm trying to remember that year offhand. That was 2017, right?
I believe so.
If that was 2017, then I know I at least had The Florida Project and Faces Places above it.
All right. I can double check on that. But then
fact check me, please.
Movie that that came out around the time you and I first started to get to know each other was in 2018, and that was The Old Man and the Gun.
Yeah.
A movie that has now creeped in the many years to my top 5. That movie is incredible.
Is that your favorite Lowery film?
Hang on, Brendan. I'm talking. Because then 21 comes out, and then he has The Green Knight. That's my favorite David Lowery film. Though it's interchangeable with Old Man and the Gun, because I just love Redford and Spacek, and even Affleck's really good in that movie too. But yes, The Green Knight was my favorite film of 2021. Still is my favorite film of that year. Just like, I mean, I know we were off the heels of talking about Ari Aster and what he can do with a $20-30 million budget with Beau is Afraid. It's kind of the same thing with David Lowery. They gave they gave him a cookie, and he made a one of those, like, he made a bakery out of it essentially. And so now he's back, and in between then I did some interviews with Jade Howley, his production designer, and Daniel Hart, his composer. And they kind of teased me about like, we're going to make a Peter Pan movie. We're going to use the Disney iconography for sure, but we're going to make our own thing. And I was very excited about that. So I knew that for a long time. And I think I told you that. I was like, they're going to make their own thing. They're going to take all the elements of past Peter Pans, but they're going to make their own thing, which kind of makes sense because that's what you kind of need to do.
That's kind of what Pete's Dragon did as well when you think about
it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So to Peter Pan and Wendy, I was very much looking forward to this. Still very pissed off that this movie is on Disney Plus and not the atrocious looking Little Mermaid that's coming out. Like, talk about an eyesore.
Wouldn't that be funny if the Little Mermaid actually ends up being great?
No, because it's directed by your favorite guy, Rob Marshall. So
I'm not a Marshall fan. Yeah,
I know you're not a Rob Marshall fan. So for you to say that is not going to happen.
Put it this way. I'm not saying that I think that's going to happen. I'm just saying it would be funny if it does.
You come on, search your feelings.
with a big if in that statement. I just said.
It's like a big if, like
with quotations, underlines, italicizes, anything that just emphasizes the if as the major talking point there.
It's such a big if. Tom Cruise is scaling it right now as we speak. That's how big it is. All right. Anyway, Peter Pan and Wendy. I thought this movie was good. I was very surprised. Because when you and I think of things that are dumped on a streaming platform, especially now where theatrical is doing so well, and there's not a pivot to change that, you know what I mean, from a lot of studios. It feels like, a lot of studios are going back to the model, but the things that they've already greenlit for their streaming services, they're leaving there. They're not really turning back on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's very rare. It's been very rare. Like Air is a perfect example. We talked about that a couple weeks ago where that was originally going to be a streamer. Its budget speaks for itself. It's like 90 to 120 million dollars, it seems like. But it's made like 50-60 million dollars. But they were not doing it with this movie for some reason. I don't understand. But then I kind of understand because it's a David Lowery movie. I don't think audiences would particularly, I think they would be disappointed. But then, I watched this movie and I thought, man, he did it again. He rubed them all.
Okay.
He rubed them all because he said, I'm going to make a Peter Pan and Wendy movie, but I'm also going to make a David Lowery movie. And that's mostly what we get here, I think. There are some choices, I think, with Pan and Hook as characters togetherly that I'm not the biggest fan of. And I've never been a fan of this sort of connecting them even further than what they have to be within the, the IP. But that being said, everything with Wendy in this movie is absolutely incredible.
If we didn't get a movie called Wendy already, I think this would have been a more appropriate title.
Yeah, well, this is a way better movie than that, so we don't have to talk about that.
I'll just jump in and say this. I don't agree. I like Ben Zeitlin's movie better.
I don't know who Ben Zeitlin is. He's never making another movie. And I'm glad that he's not. Definitely not one of my guys. But
fair.
But Everett Anderson in here is absolutely fantastic. I think I did not know that she was Mila Djokovic and Paul W.S. Anderson's child before you said that. So
I was looking at your face. I thought you may have known. It's like, oh, did Ryan not know that? Okay.
I did not know that. Going. And it's crazy that she's more talented than her parents. But anyway, just with one movie, it's astonishing. But no, I think it's really interesting what Lowery does here, and he's talking about this. Obviously, Peter Pan as a product has always been about the idea of growing up, and the idea of evolving with your time, essentially. And I thought that Lowery was able to tap into that, I think, more than a lot of Peter Pan properties have, Brendan. I felt like we have had a gobbledygook of mixed results with Pan. Like we've had Wendy. I wasn't a big fan of that. I know I joke with the guys. It's just not a movie that 100%
Ben Zeitlin's not your guy. You don't respond to either of his two films, and I get it.
No. I thought Wendy was better than Beast of the Southern Wild, but that's not saying much. And then but it's definitely better than Pan.
Never heard of that movie.
Remember Pan?
No. Don't
turn the lights off.
Don't remember it.
Entertain us.
Don't remember.
I Feel Stupid and Contagious.
Now I remember that movie does feel
There you
stupid.
go. It does. It is wildly stupid, and also very inappropriate when it comes to representation and to just the human brain. And so, and then there's like the version we kind of grew up with, the Jason Isaacs one, which is like a real. It's not Disney, property, but it's kind of more in the Barry sort of book, but it does its own thing too. So we really haven't. So I feel like people just don't want to touch Peter Pan 100% to like the animated film or the book. It feels like they just kind of, it's a property where you're able to kind of do whatever you want with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you kind of be able to put your own things. But like Lowery's been talking about mortality, and Lowery's been talking about growing up and maturity for a lot of his films.
Yeah.
And he's also been talking about legacy, which is something that I think that like in The Old Man and the Gun, he does a fantastic job. Obviously, Green Knight, he does a great job. Mortality, that's essentially a ghost story.
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
He fits perfectly in here. This is a perfect vehicle for him to do this.
Agreed.
It doesn't feel like the other Disney live action films where it's very cheap or it's very you don't feel the director behind the camera. You feel him in this movie. A lot of that has to do with him being behind the script, which is a great thing. You know what I mean? Like, him and Toby Halbrooks, who write the screenplay, it's not a perfect screenplay. This is not a perfect movie, but it is exactly what they need to do to tell this version of the story. The only aspects of this movie that I don't particularly like love is that I do think the scale of this seems small. It feels small.
Yeah.
Which I mean, that's why I guess you could say that it's on Disney Plus rather than it's in a theater. But that being said, Brendan, the flying sequences mixed with the sort of the final battle, the final 30 minutes of this movie, I think are absolutely perfect.
And the way the score by Daniel Hart incorporates the classic themes from the animated movie.
Oh my God! I mean,
this is not really it's not a musical. There are a few pirate songs here and there, but it's not a musical like the animated film. I think a lot of people went into this a little confused, maybe expecting a musical. But there are moments where Daniel Hart's score at least adapts some of the classic melodies from that animated film.
Yeah, it was not. It almost like the best film to even describe this isn't another Peter Pan movie, but it's almost akin to the spirit of like Pirates of the Caribbean. Almost at times where it
felt
has
more Studio Ghibli to me at times.
That too. I mean, it has the markings of the reason why I say pirates is because it's got its kind of own set of rules and code, and there's obviously the pirate angle to it, but that movie doesn't feel as like grand either when you really think about it.
That's true.
It's just got an extra bit of budget because of some skeleton ghosts. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like some skeleton pirates. But yeah, I think this is good. One thing that we are going to go back and forth on probably a little bit, and I'm ready for it. Jude Law as Captain Hook is good. He's very good in this movie.
Nah,
I like him. I like Jude Law. Good guy. Good at his job. And honestly, brought some emotionality to a character that I was kind of surprised, because usually just when you think of Hook, he's more than just, he's just kind of like the cartoon, essentially he's a buffoon trying to kill a child. And I thought that he had some really emotional stakes to it and brought something to Pan or something to Hook rather that character hasn't had since probably Jason Isaacs, which is some emotional complexity. And so I very much enjoyed him, and I thought that also when I was watching, I was like, man, I can't wait to get him in another David Lowery movie than just this, because good God, he should work with him. He seems really good. But yeah, the kid that played Peter Pan was Alexander Maloney.
Yeah,
sure. He's got a nice face. Seems like a good British kid.
I have some thoughts on him as well.
He's not particularly the strongest point of this. I think when the movie focuses on Wendy and on the Lost Boys, That's
who
really
are
what
not really
what it
very
shot.
heavily characterized, but they have a weird, endearing presence. Even if maybe they each have like 2 lines total in the whole movie, if you add each,
They've
of
got
their
a good
respective...
energy to them.
I did too, and I think that's all it
great.
needed. Yeah, I wanted to mingle with them. We'll say.
But the last 5 minutes of this movie, Brendan, I cannot lie, I cried. Lowery was able
I
to
think a lot of
strike
people
the
did.
balance at the end.
I got close.
Um,
Yeah,
I was
there's a
very
montage.
emotional.
There's a montage that lasts about 5 seconds from Wendy's point of view that I won't say what it is. It sounds like based on the way you're shaking your head, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
It's great. It's really great.
Despite its faults, Brendan, it's David Lowery, and I can't be mad at him. He did a good job.
Yeah, I get you. There's a lot to bounce off there. I will say there's a lot of unfortunate realities here with regard to this movie premiering on Disney Plus as opposed to theaters. And honestly, I'm not too surprised because, like you said, with movies that either premiere straight to other streaming services like a Netflix, for instance, you can just tell this was made for a streaming platform. Disney, I feel like, is kind of doing the opposite. Right? Like the movies that I think should be in theaters are going to Disney Plus. The movies that I think should be on Disney Plus are the ones going to theaters.
Yeah, like Turning Red last year. We all
Turning
thought
Red. Luca. Luca was another one.
Oh my God. How did we never get Dan Romer's score in a theater? How did that not happen?
Gosh. But I more or less feel the same way about Peter Pan and Wendy. Seeing this, I could tell, given Disney's track record right now, this seems like something they would just put to Disney Plus as opposed to theaters. And it is unfortunate. There's a lot about it I would have liked to see in a theater. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm going to be too hard on this movie, and I think a lot of it is really just due to David Lowery and what I normally expect from him, and just the fact that he gave us what I think is one of the best live-action Disney movies ever with Pete's Dragon. That was in my top 10 of that year. That was 2016, I think it was. And sometimes I go back and think that might actually be my favorite David Lowery film. It's between that and A Ghost Story. Those are the two I tend to go back and forth on. I don't think Peter Pan and Wendy is one of his better movies. I do think it is good. I do think it's good. And it's interesting to say that one of his lesser movies is still one of the better Disney live-action remakes. I still think of all of these live-action remakes we've gotten, Peter Pan and Wendy is probably still in the top 3 for me. It's Pete's Dragon, Cinderella, and maybe this one because it's at least it at least has a vision from a filmmaker that is more realized than it's not. I think the biggest problem here is I can kind of feel the tug of war happening between the Disney side of things and the Lowery side of things, certainly more so here than I did in Pete's Dragon. I mean, Pete's Dragon felt like a David Lowery film that Disney just chose to distribute, which is uncanny. But this does feel like there is a sense of compromise here, and a lot of that might be due to the length. It's a pretty short movie. It's not anywhere close to 2 hours, and I think that I don't like to talk about length as a good or bad thing, but I think in this case, this movie needed to breathe a little bit more.
It needed like 20, 30 more minutes.
Yeah, and I sort of get what the structure is, or at least I can hypothesize what I think Lowery's trying to do is that the first third of the movie, or much of the first act, is really where the recreations of the animated Peter Pan are at its most full swing. Like that's like the first third is really up until when they get to Neverland. It's not verbatim the animated movie. I mean, it's spoken differently. The dialogue's different. The vibe is different. But
the bones are there though.
Yeah, it's sequence for sequence up until they get to Neverland, really. But when they get to Neverland, the movie completely shifts. I mean, even Neverland itself, and I've seen people criticize the movie for this. It's not the most magical looking of places. It kind of just looks like they flew to Ireland.
They flew to the island that Ryan Johnson used in The Last Jedi. It looks
Yep. And
everybody's using that one. Yeah,
but I think in the case of this movie, I kind of like the more grounded approach to the magical realism here. Because the point here, and something I really did appreciate about the film and where it ultimately goes, is that Neverland itself is not really a great place to be. And in some cases, there actually is some development here regarding Captain Hook and Peter Pan as to whether who's really the villain of this story. there is something you can question about their dynamic. Now, to your point, I think the way the film kind of verbalizes that through exposition and dialogue doesn't always feel as natural to get to that point. Maybe there could have been more nuanced or some quietness added to amplify those interesting nuances there, but I like that they're here, and I do like that David Lowery is at least attempting to kind of deconstruct the Peter Pan ethos a little bit. That this idea of an adult wanting to reclaim their childhood could be both a good or bad thing, and the same from a child's perspective. Wanting to be a child for as long as you want, that's endearing, but it's also kind of a bad thing. It means that you're also running away from something. And that's what this movie addresses. I like that. I don't think it gets there as far as how it can emotionally pack that punch fully, and I think a lot of it does come down to that compromise I was talking about. But I do think there's at least an attempt at something bold here. It almost gets to being something really special, but I don't think it quite gets there, unfortunately. But when it does, it's mostly funneled through Wendy. Ever Anderson, absolutely terrific here. And I want to see her in many more roles after this.
Yeah, I think, Brendan, you mentioned, I don't think that the idea itself is a bad idea, and I don't like it. I think the execution of Pan and Hook together, tied together through their history,
it's a little wonky.
It's wonky. It's a little. It's getting a little dirty. You know what I mean? It's like it's a little. It's a little sweaty.
This movie is. This is like the best example of when I talk about a movie being uneven or feeling a little uneven. This is a great example of that.
But you know what? Its idea, like you're mentioning, it ties into the rest of the movie.
It does.
So it totally makes sense why he would want to explore that. Because, spoiler alerts for folks, we're gonna just talk about this spoilers. I'm not gonna dance around them anymore.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
I had no idea this was happening. I guess we're getting into the weeds here.
Property that's been around forever. But also spoilers for Peter Pan and Wendy. Essentially, what we're talking about here is we're talking about Pan and Hook's connection from the fact that in this version of this movie, Lowery has essentially said that the way Captain Hook became Captain Hook is because of Peter Pan. It's because of the fact that Peter and him were best friends, if I'm not mistaken, right?
They
Brendan?
were children together in Neverland. And James Hook, he's referred to James a lot more often here. He simply missed his mother. So what did Peter do? He banished him.
Which is, I mean, not cool, Peter. You know what I mean? Like, come on, man. Like, that's not right. But at the same token, though, no, he essentially then becomes very angry, very bitter. I would have also loved to have seen that, like, maybe this is just me. But even with 20, 30 minutes to tap into this, Brendan, if maybe Captain Hook's crew were former Lost Boys, and the idea of that, it wasn't, like, tap into it even more, find out the reason why they say that Hook was, like, essentially adopted by the pirates at a young age.
Yeah, I didn't like that little plot development, because I'm with you. There was a moment where I thought, man, if this is exactly what you're talking about, where the pirates themselves were former Lost Boys, and this is just this, like, full circle of sorts,
it would have been absolutely fascinating.
And again, I don't want it to make it sound like we're criticizing the movie for something we would have preferred to see, but I guess to keep it vague, I don't think the movie should have been as literal with that exposition there. I think we could have pulled the rings back a little bit there with that specific element.
Yeah, I think we could have totally been able to do that, and I think that I think that it's adding more to this, to what he's essentially doing, which is diving into the mythology and diving into the idea of, okay, this is a old man with a hook, that's got this villainous relationship, this antagonistic relationship with Peter Pan. How can we tap into that, connecting them? Because Pan does that. Pan taps into trying to connect them, but they also tap into now that's what I call, 1990s music put into it and a whole bunch of other crap. You know what I mean? Lowery specifically is using that to tie into Wendy and tie into the fact that Wendy is essentially at the point where she is turning older and she's past the point of adolescence and she's lost it. I like the idea that they have her struggling with her inner child, struggling with her adolescence throughout this film. The reason why she can't hear Tinkerbell throughout it, but the others can. You know what I mean? The fact of that her brothers, who are also really great job by overall, just great job. Outside probably a Pan by Lowery of getting a lot of kid actors that are really really good here. But I like the fact that it ties into everything. And then I do like those scenes where Hook is talking to Wendy about it, and it does get emotional. Those are Law's probably most dramatic points of the film. And Law has this ability as an actor. He's one of my favorite actors, period.
Sure.
Brendan. I think Jude Law just is able to bring things to a ground level to make you as an audience buy into even something as ridiculous as his version of Captain Hook. And then, but I just don't, I agree with you. I think the movie needs a little bit more of a breathing room, more of a landing pad to be able to stick it fully. Now, it does for me with Wendy and Peter Pan later in the film because though, and there's a little bit of a sweaty moment there too, but even beyond that, I still thought that scene, because of their relationship together in the film, what they've gone through, essentially almost like Peter having a Spider-Man 2 moment in this movie as well. Like, you know what I mean?
Thought about that, but yeah, okay, I can see what you mean there.
And them having those moments together on top of the Darling House, I thought that was really great, and also I thought it was really smart of Lowery to end the movie the way he did, and it ends on emotional high. The problem is that then, of course, the Disney version of it comes in at the end when the ship comes back into Neverland or whatever.
Oh, I didn't mind that. I didn't mind that.
And that for me, I was like, oh, okay. But even still, though, I thought, okay, I get that. That's fine. But the groundwork for everything else has to earn that too.
Well,
and you know what I mean?
I guess it's twofold, because the feeling of that final scene you're talking about, it kind of has the feeling of like a post-credit scene. And maybe again, it gets back to the execution as opposed to the what it's doing. It's the how it's going about it. But I didn't necessarily mind it because it doesn't further crystallize any arcs, because both Hook and Pan here, their arcs are kind of left dangling a little bit in a way that's not meant to set up a sequel, in a way that's actually kind of tragic, because it basically suggests that someone like Peter, he has finally acknowledged that being in Neverland for so long, he barely even remembers his mother that he ran away from in the first place now, but she's no longer here. It implies that while he knows that what he's doing is essentially running away from something that is inevitable and needs to be embraced, he also very indirectly says, I'm still not ready for that. And that's why he goes back. And there is something kind of, I don't know if hopeless is the right word, but I kind of want to use that because there is this duality happening. There's something very hopeful while also simultaneously hopeless about the movie. A lot of the hopeful side really comes through from Wendy's point of view. And this is the one Peter Pan movie that I think probably does the best job addressing motherhood as a theme. Yeah. And how Wendy really absorbs the role as mother for these lost boys specifically. And she doesn't. It's not even something that she's just looking to do. It's kind of instinctual, which I love. Which is why her happy thought at the end of the movie, that montage we were talking about, is regardless of how good the movie is in totality, that 5-second strip there will be among the best cinematic moments of the year for me. I feel like that's the moment where most people start shedding tears, and I can understand why. I think it's quite great. I love the way it realizes those themes that growing up is ultimately the greatest adventure, and you have to embrace that. I really want to love Jude Law in this movie. I like him in those quiet scenes. I'll give you that. But every other time here, I just saw Jude Law in pirate getup. I couldn't look past the Jude Law. And I don't. Maybe that's more on me than it is on Jude Law's abilities. But there's there is this juxtaposition between the comedic and almost slapstick side of Captain Hook and then the more vulnerable side of him. And I feel like Jude Law is only able to capture half of those things. The other half, again, maybe that's more on me. Maybe I'm just so attuned to seeing Jude Law in certain things. And this is kind of an out of the box role for him in some ways when you think about it. And maybe I just couldn't look past that. So maybe it'll change. This could be more of a me thing, but I wish I liked him more in this because some of those more vulnerable scenes that you're talking about, I think, are quite good.
Yeah, I think he is really good in the film.
Okay.
And I just think that, you know, I mean, I'm gonna spew a little inside baseball here, Brendan. I got to talk to Law a little bit about this movie before.
Oh, okay,
and not like for an interview or anything. I was at a thing last year and I bumped into him and it was very just like, oh my God. Like I was walking literally out of a theater.
Yeah.
At AFI Fest for Robert Downey Jr.'s documentary Senior.
Yep.
And I was holding the door for a bunch of friends and I almost, I saw this guy on the peripheral of my view and I held the door one last second because it was going to slam in his face.
Mm-hmm.
And that person was Jude Law. And so when we ended up, it was like, we were going to the after party for the film and then we ran into each other and we kind of spoke about this a little bit because I was just fascinated about this film in particular.
Oh, sure.
And talking to him a little bit about it, I mean, he wanted it to feel as if like this character, which I bought into once the film unfolds its story, is he's still a child. Essentially, he's just a grown-up child. And he's scorned. Anybody that's had a best friend in the world that's scorned them.
Yeah.
The way that Peter has and felt betrayed. And you mentioned it earlier.
If Peter was older, then this is totally the Banshees of Inisherin.
It totally is. But then it's also like, but also too, you brought it up. It's like, this is a fascinating thing where it's not Law's fault. And I don't think in a little bit of Lowery, but it's not, but it's mostly probably Disney for him not allowing to tap into, they probably don't want Peter Pan to look at like a villain when it comes out, for kids or whatever that are watching this thing.
Yeah.
But that's a more interesting thing to look at is not just the selfishness of all these other characters, but the most selfish person that could be in this movie is Peter Pan himself.
Yeah.
Because it is a selfish idea to want to never grow up. It's a nice dream, but when others need to, for other purposes or want to, in this case with Captain Hook.
Right.
It's a very interesting thing in a dynamic to want to take that away from someone. Mm-hmm. It almost reminded me a little bit of the complexities of, and I know I'm going to say another controversial film, but it reminded me of the complications between Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. This idea of what is our hero.
So many people probably just closed down this.
They just closed this out, but it's the truth.
We're done. We're done.
It's the truth, though. It's that what if your hero that we've all wanted to be, what if their intentions aren't always the best? What if they are complex individuals that their actions can be deemed selfish, could be deemed a mixture of emotions that you need to explore and you need to talk about? Because from one angle, yes, never growing up is a great thing because you don't have to face nearly the crazy crap that we deal with in our life. But at the same token, though, the instinct ability for us to grow and mature and get better as a species is something that's always inside of us.
Sure.
And is an essential part of life. The essential part of life is growing up. We all have a due date, and to chase that, you're chasing something that is inevitable. And so when someone wants to go back and be with their family, because we know Peter Pan, for the most part, to take these kids to Neverland, essentially, and show them that this world is bigger than better than the family that they have. Yeah. When somebody wants to go back, and it's his best friend, Brendan.
Yeah. I love
it. It's compelling.
It's a great idea.
It's a compelling idea, and it involves a mixture of emotions.
Yep.
Of this then performance from Jude Law, which is, you're talking about duality, the duality of this giant man also having this childlike scorn inside of him. It's a mixture of things, the paranoia, it's a tightly more, for me, as I was watching it, it's a very tight performance that I wish got to have more of the breathing room to explore, because it's not like Jeffrey Rush in Pirates of the Caribbean here. That is full over the top. There's no emotionality underneath those currents.
I don't know.
You know what I mean?
I think there's some there.
There's a lot of it is like screaming and a dead monkey that they can't kill and all this other stuff. There's all these other things that are added to there. And yes, there is a little bit of that stuff of that relationship, but there's not as much of it being essentially this person's entire life has been destroyed by this person specifically.
Yeah.
And I found that to be really interesting. I just wish that they tapped into it more, that they explored it more. But obviously, because it's a Disney Plus product, because of the fact that it's Disney, and they were under probably different leadership at the time when the movie was being made, as opposed to Iger now.
Yeah,
I think that like that helps, because Iger was the one that helped let him do
Pete's Dragon.
Pete's
Right?
Dragon.
Yeah.
He comes back before this movie is done. You know what I mean? Or after this movie's done. So, and this was already announced for a streaming platform.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, we don't know
I
that
think
for
that that's
sure, but I
something
think
to factor in there.
I think that's a safe guess to make, that maybe that is why there is this feeling of compromise happening here. Like this feels mostly like a David Lowery film, but it doesn't always feel like a David Lowery film. Unlike Pete's Dragon, which I thought was 110% a David Lowery film. But I don't think that's the case. I mean, I will say this is certainly more of a Lowery film than any other live-action remake was to their respective directors. So there's certainly more going for it for that. And with regard to Captain Hook, I love those ideas. And maybe the issue for me comes down to just the overall structure, because when you get some potential moments like that, then we get interrupted by the classic slapstick chase with the crocodile, for instance, which I'll give Lowery credit. I think the comedic timing of it is well executed. I think the choreography is pretty good. I think the way Jude Law tries to channel the comedic energy there it was kind of off for me. And maybe it was meant to be jarring. Maybe it was meant to seem overly childish, because there is this childlike nature to Hook that he has ultimately forgotten about, like we're talking about. So I guess that's part of it too. With regard to Peter Pan himself, played by Alexander Maloney, I keep going back and forth whether I actually like his performance or not. Because there's an argument to be made that Pan in this movie is kind of meant to be more of a blank slate of sorts, that he is kind of more of this cipher of everything we're talking about, and how that then eventually funnels into the real lead character of this story, Wendy herself. So if I look at it through that lens, I can appreciate Maloney's performance a little bit more. But at the same time, we are getting some very detailed backstory regarding Peter, how that relates to Hook, how that relates to his own motivations, his own backstory, which his tragic backstory is no different than any other villain tragic backstory when you think about it too. So I like that interesting choice there. But when it gets that specific, I'm not sure if Maloney is really expressing enough to translate those emotions. You know, I think he's very verbal. He definitely is able to literally carry his voice very eloquently and energetically, almost like he's about to break into song. But it all
kind of wish he did.
Well, I could have sensed that. He definitely had a theater energy to him. Yeah. But you know, sometimes a great performance all comes down to the eyes, right? And there was something blank there for me. And again, maybe that was the point. Maybe this was meant to seem more like an idea of a character as opposed to a fully realized character. But I don't know. I feel like it's trying to go both ways. I don't think I don't think it's able to have its cake in it.
I agree with you, Brendan. I think like his performance it's kind of baffling, because like I think he kind of looks and fits the mold, right? You see him and you're like, yeah, he looks like a Peter Pan.
When I saw the advertisements for the movie, the posters, the trailer and stuff, and just saw the way he moved, the way he carried himself, I thought, okay, I'm seeing Peter Pan there.
That's Peter Pan. So I get that. I think I think the problem is that, and this might be the fault of, I don't know if it's Lowery or Disney or whoever. I really try not to fault David Lowery a lot when he's dealing with the machine. No, honestly, like, to be fair, I'm never going to fault a director that I know can create a singular transcendent vision throughout their career consistently when they're working with a giant machine like Disney. It's kind of hard it's like John Watts. I don't know what a John Watts movie looks like, okay? Because he's mostly for his career has worked with Disney.
Have you seen Cop Car with Kevin
No.
Bacon?
Oh wait, he did Cop Car?
Yeah.
I mean, like, sure, but like for me,
I mean, it doesn't feel like any of the Spider-Man movies, to be perfectly
no, it
honest.
doesn't feel like any of that. But
and even
now
that, Cop Car's okay. I think it's a fun.
Yeah, it's like,
thriller.
no. You know what I mean, Brendan? Like,
Yeah, I know
this is a
you
guy
mean.
that's like, you look at his, like, everybody was kind of like dogging on the cinematography here or whatever, and it's like, yeah, it's a little bit darker than it usually is, but I mean, like, whatever, like, get over it. Like, it still kind of aesthetically feels like a David Lowery movie.
It aesthetically feels like a movie. It's still, the movie does look great. At least from an art direction and what it's able to capture, the way the camera moves and everything. And even some of those flying sequences, despite some wonky green screen at times, it's at least inventive in the way it's trying to capture camera movement and overall sense of scale. Now, the color palette to the movie could have been brightened a little bit. It does kind of have a little bit brightened. It does have that typical house drab brand that we tend to see with movies like this. But it's certainly more vibrant than whatever we're seeing from the Little Mermaid trailers. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
right now.
I mean, like, that movie looks like a dumpster fire compared to this thing.
I mean, it doesn't even look like a black and white. It looks black. Everything just looks black.
That movie, I'm telling you, I don't understand. Okay, side tangent here. I don't understand how Disney cannot have consistently good movies with underwater sequences when they own Pixar, which Pixar movies always have like what looks like real life water in their movies.
Yeah.
And then they own Avatar. So I don't understand how Little Mermaid
it's all agenda. You know,
Black Panther Wakanda Forever looks so bad
movies like
underwater.
Luca, movies like Finding Nemo, you need that type of visual selling point, right?
Yeah.
Whereas The Little Mermaid, the selling point is, oh, you love The Little Mermaid? Go watch it again. So we can spend less money on those other things.
You know that movie's going to be 50 minutes longer than the animated version?
I have no idea what they're going to... I guess I'm baffled.
You know that?
I'm so baffled.
You know that? Like, we're
well,
talking about we want a little bit more Peter Pan and Wendy here.
Yeah.
And they're like, no. We gave you all of that and then some for The Little Mermaid.
The Little Mermaid's going to be over 2 hours, isn't it?
It's going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes long.
Oh my gosh!
It should
I think about
be that long.
The Lion King. I'm not going to call that a live action remake because it's still an animated movie. But
that movie is. You can call that anything but a movie.
Well,
that's
that
almost
one
like torture.
That wasn't 50 some minutes longer than its animated counterpart,
No.
but it was still longer. I think it was maybe 30 minutes longer, and mostly what all that movie did was elongate scenes we've already seen. And if that's what the Little Mermaid is going to do, then I mean, it didn't work before.
Yeah, still under 2 hours though.
Oh yeah, it was like hour 50 something. I think it was
hour 58.
Yeah,
right under the gun.
Wow,
still not a good movie.
Nope. Probably the worst one. It's probably the worst one.
It's definitely the worst one. It's
certainly the most soulless of them all.
Definitely. Oh, for sure. That's why, like, it'll be really fascinating to see Barry Jenkins take over that property for his prequel sequel kind of thing that he's doing
Mufasa.
because that actually might have a director with some soul. That doesn't have like all that CGI. It'd be like dead-eyed.
Yeah.
And I've heard some stuff about it, and I've heard good things, which
that's good. And all these movies need are a soul. You know, Disney movies are all about the soul, right? They just
need and not just P. Doctor's soul, but like a real soul. You know what I mean?
Soul,
like
it needs sincerity. That's what it needs. It needs that kind of soul.
They need a sense of wonder and sincerity to them.
Yeah,
and
at least Peter Pan and Wendy has that. You know, like I don't love the movie, but it at least has that.
It for sure has that, and I think that aesthetically, for the production design, I think Jade Howey does really great work again
Sure.
Lowery, they've worked together on a couple of movies. She also did the production design for A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Which
that great.
Yeah. So then she was also responsible for those great transitions that look like miniatures, like the show did.
Exactly.
That was a brilliant touch.
Yeah, and then of course I think Daniel Hart's score here.
It's wonderful.
Can we talk about one of the early contenders of the year? I mean,
well, every time Daniel Hart does a score for a movie, I think it's one of the best of the year. It's like he's like John fair. Williams working today.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he's able to blend the classic Disney stuff in there with new material enough, and I think he does a really fantastic job. I do think that Lowery's direction here is still really solid. For the most part of it, I do think that those. You're right, Brendan. I can't really fault him for getting like a lower budget than something like The Little Mermaid, but he does the best what he can under the parameters that he's kind of given. Like it felt like there might be a longer cut of this. There felt like there could have been something more to it.
I was going to save that for my final thoughts, Ryan. You're kind of beat me to the punch.
You're.
But I'll just jump in and say this if you don't mind. I'm not saying that this will happen. I'm not predicting it, nor am I saying I ultimately need to see it. But if at some point there's a director's cut of this movie, I would not be surprised. I'll simply say that. I want to see it.
Yeah.
I'll say that too. I'd like to see it. I think his vision is mostly still here, slightly compromised by the Disney machine, but I'm wondering what else, because he said in interviews that this was his favorite movie he's ever made. At least when he was making it. But I mean, of course, any artist is going to say something like that in the early stages of principal photography. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, Disney paid me. Yeah, it's my favorite movie I've ever made. They gave me a big freaking check and I can pay off my mortgage. You know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, like his reasonings for it, it made sense given his track record and the kind of person that he is. And I thought, man, he is the perfect director for this. And
honestly, he is. He seems to, like I was saying earlier, where he is at the trajectory of his career, talking about a lot of the things from The Green Knight and A Ghost Story and An Old Man and the Gun, Mortality, Legacy.
Youth kind of plays a part in that, at least with Pete's Dragon. But there is this almost.
There are all those elements that fit perfectly into a Peter Pan, and that's the thing is, this is the best Peter Pan movie we've gotten in a long, long time. Because I think personally, the director fits the material, at least. Like and actually has not all the way something new to say. But for enough of it has kernels of an idea or kernels of things to continue to want us to go back to. Obviously, like the movie kind of sets up maybe like more. I don't know if he wants to do more. I just think that that's kind of how a movie ends.
That's just kind of the Disney way of doing it.
It's kind of a Disney way of doing it. But like, I have to say, like, it was, I know that we were like, oh, we'd like more, but also too, easy breezy, hour 48 or whatever this movie is, hour 40, kind of goes by. You get to see some really good things. You get some things in it. Then you go, man, I wish they would have fleshed that out more. But overall, it's at least more interesting than a shot-for-shot remake. Or something that looks aesthetically like an eyesore.
Yeah.
And, I applaud him for making it. It's probably, once again, one of the best Disney live action movies. But that, again,
it's a low bar.
That's a low bar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't ask you this. Did you like the Mulan spinoff?
I did. I was, the thing is, like, I was more frustrated by Mulan than anything else because I think it makes some choices that were a little questionable regarding her character arc that I didn't necessarily love. But at least that one, I felt like it was trying to pull influences from different things. Like there were times I thought this reminded me a lot of like Zhang Yimou a little bit. And so there was at least an artistry to that one that I thought, okay, I can appreciate this one more. I like this more than Mulan. I'll say that though. I do think it's a better movie overall.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. As far as other final thoughts here, as we close out this conversation, I'm trying to think about other Peter Pan adaptations that we've gotten. I don't think it's my favorite Peter Pan movie. I'll simply say that. I think the more I think about it, I might still prefer the animated counterpart a little bit, and that's it's mostly because it's something I grew up with. I think Lowery's film does make the right changes that needed to be made, especially with regard to Tiger Lily.
Yeah.
And,
shit.
Yeah, I mean we know the stuff in the animated film from 1953, I think it was. Yeah,
boy.
it's questionable. I think the biggest problem for me in that animated movie is that it's just really tedious.
It doesn't need to be in there.
It really doesn't. Which is unfortunate because I'll admit I do like the song "What Makes the Red Man Red" as far as just functioning as a melody. I think it's a catchy song. I don't necessarily like the ramifications.
The ramifications or intentions behind it. Like,
exactly.
I get
Exactly.
you. Yeah, it's not good. It hasn't
Yeah.
aged well.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about it is you gotta need to leave that in there, because I know Disney was thinking about getting rid of some of that stuff in there. We need to learn through our old properties what not to do in our new properties.
No,
And I think you're right,
history
Brendan,
redeemed to repeat ourselves. Let's not cover the mistakes. And I do think this movie, David Lowery's film specifically, does a good job correcting a lot of those things. The actress that plays Tiger Lily, again, I'm going to try and pronounce her name here, Alyssa Wapawanatok. She's really good here, very good here. And many of the young actors who play the Lost Boys, despite having very little to say or do, I thought were very nicely varied. Very, you mentioned that they have a good vibe to them, and I agree with you on that.
There's a good spirit to them.
Very good spirit. But looking at the overall, I guess, trajectory of Peter Pan movies, this is certainly one of the better ones. I really need to rewatch that one from 2003 again with Jason Isaacs, because a lot of people have been going back to that and saying it's actually the best one.
people, yeah, but also people got nostalgia blinders for things.
Well,
too.
that's the thing. I noticed a lot of people saying that are those around our age that maybe saw it at that time. I saw it later, so I never grew up with it.
Got a great trailer. They put that Coldplay clock song in there.
That was one of those times when they put a popular song and okay.
But also that makes kind of sense for a Peter Pan movie to have clocks in there. You know what I mean?
It does.
It's not on. Sometimes on the nose is okay. But can I say two things real quick?
Go for it,
Brendan. One is and this is speaking to the inclusion of the diversity within the Lost Boys, and also for Wendy being in this title. Which we can't stand enough how great Everett Anderson is. She's someone that I hope it gave me like the kind of like the reminding of like when I saw Super 8 and I saw Ella Fanning in that movie, and I was like, oh, she's going to be a star. Maybe not everybody else in this movie, but she's going to be a star.
Yeah.
And it's not just about nepotism, or anything. It's about literally the fact that she has a screen presence that I think will bode well in other projects.
Yeah.
The way that this movie's been received and sort of trolled on by online communities, I know we don't want to talk about it, give it too much air. I will just say
it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
This movie doesn't deserve that. This movie doesn't need that. I mean, like, it's so random why this movie gets picked on of all movies to get picked on. This movie is great. It's a great one for kids.
If that's the energy that you're spending on this movie, then I'm sorry. I think
you're doing it wrong.
Your life needs to be busier and occupied by other hobbies.
No, I just hope that Disney doesn't see any of that and take that out on Lowery or the creatives behind here. You know what I mean? It's like that's completely out of their control. And that's not the movie that they were trying to make. People trying to say it's this woke thing or whatever, or whatnot. It's literally built.
That'll be the first and last time we use that word in the InSession Film podcast.
I hate using that word, but I hate using that word just for point of reference. I hate using that word. But that's what these trolls online are saying about it. And I think that's completely disingenuous to Lowery's vision, this cast, the updating of this material. It's a good thing to have. And I agree
speaking
with you,
of the cast, sorry to cut you off. Speaking of the cast, I just want to make sure we call out this other individual, Yara Shahidi as Tinkerbell. Really good, here. Really charming.
She's great.
Really
she's
charming.
I wish we had a little bit more with her.
Yeah.
But she's perfect as Tinkerbell. It's kind of like that Tink's always that up to no good sort of character throughout this entire adventure, and I thought that she was great. I wish she had maybe a little bit more interactions with Peter Pan himself,
Well, yeah, she has more interactions with Wendy, which might
Wendy.
be, might be the point though, because that final moment between the two of them. If there are two tear-inducing moments in the movie, it's the one we already mentioned with that 5-second montage from Wendy's point of view, and then it's the final moment she has with Tinkerbell.
Yeah, which is absolutely like heartbreaking. Broke my heart.
It's really good.
But I gotta say this: if David Lowery is gonna keep making Disney live action movies, so then he can finance whatever projects he's gonna do in the future.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm
Good
fine
on
with
you.
that. I'm fine with that.
Good
for
on you,
him.
mate.
Yeah, good.
You're the only one that's being able to do that at a consistent rate.
Yeah,
that I can trust.
I just
Because,
hope. Yeah. Go ahead.
He's
go ahead.
doing some movie with Anne Hathaway, I think, next.
Oh, Mother
the
Mary, I
fashion
think it's
industry?
called. It's like it's a music movie of sorts or something.
Yeah, like about the fashion industry.
Yeah,
something like that?
that's interesting.
Hell
But yeah,
yeah.
I think he's working with A24 again for that one. So he's got two studios that works between the one for me, one for you kind of mentality. But I'm with you. If he's going to keep working for Disney to keep that trajectory going, at least he's making, well, for the most part, his own movies in the process. I guess, selfishly speaking, if he's going to do another Disney movie, I hope it's more of another Pete's Dragon than it is Peter Pan and Wendy, even though I do still like this movie. But I think you make a great point that maybe it's leadership at Disney that led to a more compromised vision here as opposed to Pete's Dragon, because Bob Iger was really, at that time, he was more about creative voices having more of a say in that.
The hate point of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think also, do you have a film that you would like? If Lowery has to come back to Disney to create a trilogy of sorts, what do you think would be the best to fit his sensibilities?
Black Cauldron.
I was going to say Black Cauldron too.
Black Cauldron.
That makes...
I could see him maybe trying to channel some of his Green Knight-isms into that. Yeah. I can also see, I think it's already being made by someone. I don't know for sure, but maybe something like The Sword in the Stone. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really good for him too. I mean, if we didn't have like 2 terrible Maleficent videos, I think that we would have a problem with that. He would have, that would have been really good for him.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Well, I mean, what, a Big Hero 6, right? Because they're remaking Moana, so we can just take movies.
We can just take something that's only like 5 years old and remake it.
Honestly, give him Frozen. Let's do it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
A David Lowery Frozen movie, terrifying. I think audiences would not like that.
No, I don't think so either. I'm sticking with Black Cauldron. I think that is, well, because it sounds like you and I are in the same headspace where we're going to be looking at Disney animated movies that needed to be remade because they just weren't very good in the first place.
Yeah, something that's a little bit lesser known of a product.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That has the IP, but maybe also, and I'm not saying that because a lot of people know Peter Pan, but like Peter Pan's not the one they're rushing to,
right?
When they're if you got all the Disney movies right here, Peter Pan's getting picked in like 10th in the draft. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and it's also got to be something that connects to him. And I think the darker elements of the Black Cauldron would work for him.
I agree. It'd be so interesting. Like, what if there's an announcement that he's doing another Disney live action remake, and it turns out to be like Oliver and Company or something like that?
Rescuers Down Under. You know what I mean? Something like that.
I was gonna say the Aristocats, but apparently that's already being helmed by Questlove of all people.
I'm sure that movie will get made. Like just some of the like choices, and oh my god, no, but I think like it would be, you know what, Rescuers Down Under actually doesn't sound too bad actually, because like
it doesn't. No, rescues in general, I could see that kind of working in a maybe updated setting.
Honestly, like the Great Mouse Detective, that's another thing too. Like these are things that could, like the Brave Little Toaster actually wouldn't be bad
Disney?
for David Lowery. Yeah, wasn't that Disney?
It may have been directed. I don't know for sure. I honestly don't remember.
Wasn't that something like that? Would be really good. Talk about existential dread. You could just see a toaster for 30 seconds in the frame, making toast, kind of like Rooney Mara eating a pie. You know what I mean? If it was Frozen, you'd see the princesses make a snowman from scratch. It would be a 45-minute sequence, and it would be the most devastating thing you've seen in cinematic history.
Oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. I don't know if the Brave Little Toaster is Disney, but I see your point. I'm going to stick with Black Cauldron and Sword in the Stone. I think are the two that I would love to see. I think they would definitely fit his his Green Knight sensibilities. I feel like that's all we need to say on Peter Pan and Wendy. Good movie, still a good movie. I may have sounded harder on it because I know what David Lowery has done before with Disney.
Just expectations.
If anything, it's more on me. But I mean, it's an uneven movie at times, and it could have certainly been tighter. Maybe that director's cut is upcoming. We'll see about that. If you want to see some more thoughts from us on Peter Pan and Wendy, we do have a full review that you can check out at InSessionFilm.com. JD Duran also has some thoughts on our Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. You can also let us know your thoughts by emailing us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com or hit us up on social media at InSessionFilm. Ryan, thanks for joining me on this trip to Neverland. Really do appreciate it. Really great stuff here. You've got a screening to catch, so I guess I have to get you out of here pretty soon.
I do, and but it was nice holding your hand as we flew through the sky. Now let
We
go,
can fly,
so I can go
we
see
can
my
fly,
movie.
we can fly, we can fly.
Let me go so I can go see my movie. Let me go. And happy thoughts. Happy thoughts to
Happy
everybody.
thoughts. Yeah, happy
good
thoughts
movie.
indeed.
Go watch the movie. It's David Lowery. Who doesn't want to see David Lowery make movies?
Yeah, that's a happy thought for me. That'll make me fly, for sure. Thanks for listening, everyone. We really do appreciate it. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast.
A little focus goes a long way, and a whole lot of focus, well, that puts you light years ahead of the competition. That's why at Vernon, they only focus on heating and cooling. And as the heating and cooling specialists, they're great at it, especially after 43 years. Get your AC ready for summer with Vernon's $69 spring tune-up. You heard right, only $69. Go to VernonHeating.com. Vernon, the heating and cooling specialists.